Thanks a lot, guys. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Can you talk about the Amtrak security measures? Will there be any announcement about Amtrak security?
You've just been listening to the press conference from the Attorney General of D.C., the Acting Attorney General, and the FBI Director, and they have now firmly framed the White House Correspondents Dinner shooting as an attempted assassination of the president, outlining various charges, including interstate weapons transport and the use of a firearm in a violent crime. Now, they noted the gunman was just one floor above the ballroom and rushed in just after the president and first lady had arrived. And they added that law enforcement did not fail. They did what they were trained to do. Well, for more on this, I want to welcome Alex Plitzes. He is a CNN national security analyst, and Jeff Swartz, a former judge in Miami-Dade County. Good to have you both with us.
Nice to be with you.
I want to start with you first, Jeff. So we just heard the three charges outlined. The one we were waiting for was the attempted assassination of the U.S. president. How high a legal bar is it for that charge?
Well, it's more than just his acts. You would have to prove that the president of the United States was an intended victim. My reading of the manifesto, he didn't actually use Donald Trump's name, but he alluded to administration officials, of which the president is one. That's why I think that eventually they will charge him with attempted assassination of several of the officials that were at the dinner, so that it all falls together on an and it will make it a tighter indictment when the time comes to issue the indictment.
Exactly. And Alex, I want to ask you about the fact that this is now being described as the third attempted assassination of U.S. President Trump. We heard the director there being asked about the threat level, the Attorney General rather, being asked about the threat level when it comes to political violence and rhetoric in the country. Are we seeing a shift in the landscape?
Well, I mean, I think the outcome is in the evidence, right? It's one thing to discuss the discourse, it's very much another to see what's in front of us. And we have seen an uptick in political violence across the spectrum over the last few years. And the rhetoric, quite frankly, in our political environment in the United States has gotten out of control. And the narrative, from folks on the political extremes has been divisive, and it has been, in some cases calling for violence. And there really is no place for that. If you disagree with the president or his policies, that is not an acceptable response to any of that. So it is, disheartening. And obviously, since an attempt was made, this is not rhetoric. It was, in fact, another attempt on the president's life.
And Jeff, to you, the prosecutors are seeking to hold this suspect until trial in a case involving threats against top officials within an administration, particularly if it does involve the U.S. president. How heavily do judges weigh that danger?
Well, they'll weigh that danger because they always weigh a danger to the community. That's a very important thing. Some people that are held in detention show a threat towards the community, either whether they're drug dealers or they are people who robbed a bank or they're people that use weapons. They weigh that as a very strong indicia that they should be held, because you don't want to let somebody out who's going to commit another violent crime. So that the bottom line is that that's really what they look at. In this particular case, because it's the president, because it was a political act, that's also something that will be weighed. I don't think there's any possibility he's going to get a bond. And even if he did get one, it would one that the U.S. Treasury probably couldn't post.
And Alex, to you, we heard that the suspect allegedly brought these firearms and knives from California via train to Chicago and then Chicago to D.C. and obviously brought it very close to this what should have been a very high security event. Does that point to a greater failure when it comes to perimeter security, intelligence gathering, even the fact that he was able to transport these weapons in a state?
So I think it points to a lot of research ahead of time and purposeful exploitation of security vulnerabilities. And this was not somebody who was having a short-term mental illness episode where this just sort of happened. You can't fly on aircraft with weapons, but you're not searched on trains. Your bags don't go through x-rays. So it seems that the logical conclusion, there was a purposeful attempt to take trains to avoid detection through air travel, which took quite a bit of time. So this was something that was obviously thought through, and then travel took place for a while. And then hotel. Now, that does become a question about perimeter security. This was presented as a binary choice between hotels that are unsecure and a new secure ballroom being constructed. But at the end of the day, his bags were not searched going into the hotel at a place where the president and vice president were known to be staying, along with multiple cabinet officials. There was a stairwell that was empty that he ran down with no one posted on the corner there. And even when you go to the airport, you've got velvet ropes and things that sort of, force you to stop and kind of move back and forth before you get to the checkpoint. There was nothing there. He flew straight through the X-ray machine. It's easy to Monday morning quarterback, but it's clear that there could have been security improvements. Now, fortunately, he was stopped on the first floor before he got anywhere near the ballroom. But there's always obviously room for improvement here. And at the end of the day, it's always a balance between security. So if you talk to law enforcement, they'll tell you, look, if you have to search every single person that gets on a train, a subway, or tries to get into a stadium, you'll kind of shut things down, and there's a balance that they have to strike. I do believe there's room for improvement. I think there'll be an after-action review that will determine what else can be done. But to present this as a binary choice between a new secure ballroom and an unsecure hotel, I don't think is quite an accurate framing.
Yeah, exactly. And Jeff, finally to you, we heard from the Attorney General of DC that these 3 charges are just the beginning. We know so far that the FBI has conducted raids on a home in LA. They're going through the manifesto right now, and they're speaking to family members of the suspect. What other charges are likely? Is domestic terrorism one of them?
It's a possibility. They're going to have to show that it was meant to be a terroristic event as opposed to a straight out assassination, which in and of itself is not necessarily a terrorist event. However, if they can attach a political motive to it, that may be the reason why they could try to charge him with terrorism. I think that as much as they like to pile things on, I'm a former prosecutor. I used to like to keep things lean and mean. I don't like to add a whole lot of stuff on just because I can. It was easier that way. You're going to get the same result, whether it's terrorism or whether it's attempted murder. You're going to get the same result.
Yeah.
I think to a certain extent, they probably should lay off of that one.
Jeff Swartz, Alex Plitzers, appreciate both of you and your analysis. Thank you very much. We're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back.